Thank you for coming to the show. As you know, today, Ross Coulthart dropped some pretty big news that this coming Saturday, I think on an exclusive on News Nation at 8 p.m. Eastern, he's going to have some whistleblowers, plural, firsthand, involved in the UFO crash retrieval and back engineering program. So what I'm going to do this evening with you is we're just going to go over some quotes from his earlier presentation that he had on Reality Check. And then I'm going to share some quotes with you from Trump Jr.'s show on Tumblr, because I went through and I watched both of them and I highlighted quotes through the transcript that I thought were noteworthy. So we'll go over all of them. And when relevant, I will discuss the quotes themselves. And I'm in absolutely no hurry tonight. And we're going to do this methodically. And I'm not going to talk too fast because I have a tendency to do that. The funny thing is, earlier today, I was actually working on a video talking about all the hubbub that has been going on, because recently on the Vinny Adams show, James Fox said that a big story is going to emerge in January. And also recently, Ross Coulthart said, I think on Need to Know, that in early January, all hell is going to break loose. And I guess it appears that he was not overhyping, because the story that's coming out right now, and we'll obviously get much more details about it on Saturday, it does look like it will be a bombshell. Now, no more beating around the bush. Let's just go right into it. We're going to start with the reality check that Ross Coulthart put out today. And I'm just going to read the highlights from what he stated and then give commentary where it's relevant. And I quote, "But today I'm going to tell you about a story that will, I suspect, rock Washington and possibly have a huge influence on a lot of people around the world who've wanted answers to that big question for many, many years. Are we alone? And the short answer, we're not. This week, we are presenting definitive evidence from firsthand whistleblowers, people who have operated within the legacy crash retrieval program, that is, retrievals of non-human craft. Principal informant is a former, very well-respected Tier 1 operator, highly trained Tier 1 military operator trained at the elite levels of the U.S. military. His service verified and testified by 3 other witnesses. The account that he gives of what he saw and what he euphemistically refers to as the retrieval of a non-human craft is backed by 2 of his colleagues who were there with him. This is going to be a groundbreaking story, and yes, we're running it right before the inauguration because we want to send a message. The message is it's time for the public to be told the truth. The government or sections of the government have been knowingly, intentionally lying to the public for years, and if they want to fight, they can have one, because people are now prepared to come forward. This week, you're going to hear from a first-hand whistleblower. Let's have a listen. So I'll tell you what is spoken about in the preview, but it's interesting that Ross Coulthart stated that he is intentionally putting this out right before President-elect Donald Trump gets signed in office. That's interesting. And that might have an influence on Trump going forward. I mean, it was just recently that Trump said that the current administration is lying about drones. He doesn't know why they're lying. It's very strange. And Trump said that on the second day of his presidency, he's going to look into it and tell the American public the truth. Well, what I would say to that is, if he thinks it's so important for the American public to know the truth about the drone issue, which might have crossover into non-human intelligence, and we'll get into that later, how much more so the UFO issue in general? So I hope this coming out on Saturday, and of course, it's going to be covered by many, many news outlets, I have to assume. You know, it's not just going to be covered by News Nation. I hope that the Trump administration will have no choice but to catch wind of this in a very serious way. And that will start planting the seeds in the Trump administration to understand that they're going to have to take action. And it's really interesting that it's not just like the principal informant is the main person who is the main witness. But as I understand it from that passage, it's corroborated with 3 of his colleagues. So there are multiple people, as I understand it, that were involved in this crash retrieval effort. So this is not, so we could make the argument that this is more substantial than what David Grush brought to the table back in, I guess it was June of 2023. So this news could be much bigger than the David Grush story and could lead to much greater impact down the road. So now I'm going to go ahead and read where I'm basically conveying what the preview conveys. So here's the whistleblower talking right now. So it became very clear the first time our communication process and procedure was modified. Oh, no. Okay. No, excuse me. So let me start here. Ross Coulthart in the interview says to the first-hand witness, yes, first-hand. Let me emphasize that. He says, so tell me about the moment when you realized that you were involved in a retrieval of non-human technology, alien tech. He responds, so it became very clear the first time our communication process and procedure was modified. And then just visually looking at the object on the ground, you could tell that it was extraordinary and anomalous. It was not human. How close did you get? Ross Coulthart stated. Whistleblower responds, well, I was a helicopter pilot and I operate within 150 feet to 250 foot long line. So I got within 150 feet of this object. I'll interject. 150 feet is unfathomably close. From a helicopter where you have perfect vision looking out the cockpit, so I assume, unless there was like fog or something. Let's continue. Ross Coulthart said, what did you see? The whistleblower firsthand responded, I saw an egg, a white egg. Ross responded, was there any visible propulsion system on it? Whistleblower responded, no, no, there's no engine. There was no thermal signature. I was operating at night. Okay, it was at night, so let me emphasize that. When I finally came in to pick it up. So I guess he was part of the retrieval effort. So I'm working under night vision goggles at the time, and it was quite clear. I flipped them up, flipped them down, and looked at it a couple of different ways. Then Ross goes, how did you know that the egg-shaped object was non-human in origin? The whistleblower responded, well, visually, after seeing all kinds of things in my past, it was clearly something that was ridiculously looking. It's inconsistent with anything I'd ever seen before. I can also tell you that the reaction by my team, we all knew we were dealing with something extraordinary, and at no stage were you ever subsequently told that the craft was of non-human origin. Sorry, it's a little hard for me to tell who's talking at times because it's transcript, but let me continue. I will tell you that during this process, this is the whistleblower talking, over the last couple years, it's been confirmed to me by ranking members of the UAP task force that what we were working with that night was in fact NHI, non-human intelligence, and it was not a unique experience. Okay, so this whistleblower, who as I understand it is a tier 1 special forces operator, went on record making the claim in no uncertain terms that it was confirmed to him and his team by ranking members, plural, of the UAP task force, that what they were looking at looking at that night was in fact non-human intelligence, and it also was not a unique experience. Let me just make sure everything's continuing to work. Yep, everything seems to work. Okay. All right, let me continue. Now, Ross Coulthart begins to speak again because the preview's over. And he states, now, as you'll see in this week's story, the bona fides, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that word, of witnesses are verified to our satisfaction. We've been able to check their credentials and their service with people at the very top of the national security establishment and inside the Congress. We know that the evidence has already been presented to the Pentagon's UFO Investigation Office, AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. We know that evidence has been given by primary whistleblower to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence. Congress already has this information. We've made sure that our whistleblower follows the proper form to ensure that the proper authorities are notified and alerted to what the significance of this witness has to say. Okay, I think that's important. So he went through all the proper channels, AARO, Congress. We'll go in more depth later why the AARO has lied, even though they got this information, because that's covered in other highlights that I have. Let's see what the next highlight that I have is. I have to scroll down where, okay, that's it. So now we're going to turn to what aired live today on Trump Jr.'s show on Rumble, where he interviewed Ross Coulthart, and then he interviewed Lou Elizondo. So I have quotations from both of them. Let's start with the beginning where he interviewed Ross Coulthart, and here's my first highlight. Some of these highlights might be repetitive, but bear with me. Please keep in mind, this story broke today, hours ago, and I didn't have much time to prepare, but it's really exciting to go over this with you all during this exciting time. Some people think that this story is going to bring us to the next level, well beyond what David Grush led to, and we'll find out because, well, we're living it, aren't we? We're living it. So here's the first quote. And I quote, and what we're revealing is firsthand, this is Ross Coulthart speaking, and what we're revealing is firsthand evidence from people who are top-level trained, Tier 1 military operatives, patriots, men who love their country with a passion, but who understand also that there's an accountability problem here. Here, that there are faceless people inside the national security bureaucracy who have taken it upon themselves to conduct the expenditure of possibly billions, if not trillions, of dollars on a covert program that is being deliberately concealed from Congress. Another highlight. But I'd love to know what successive presidents would say about what they've been told, because I think even the commander-in-chief over the years have been lied to about this. And I think there's a pretext that goes right back to the 1950s to justify the secrecy. Apparently, President Eisenhower made an order that this would all be kept secret, and essentially that's been done by people in the national security bureaucracy. So there is a belief among some that President Eisenhower signed something into legislation, some kind of obscure legislation that presidents are able to do. And the secrecy has been going on for decades because of something that he instituted. But I do think that a lot of people find it a bit of a stretch to rely on that decades later and to believe that they're aligning with the law because of what Eisenhower allegedly instituted, that just because he instituted something decades ago, they are not held accountable for keeping all the other presidents out of the loop. Now, of course, David Grush has said that some presidents have been told more than others. It seems some presidents haven't been told anything. And of course, Coulthart said that regarding the expenditures, possibly billions, if not trillions of dollars have gone into these covert programs. I mean, think about this, folks. Think about this. This isn't just about non-human intelligence. This isn't just about we're not alone and there's aliens. This is about the biggest scandal in human history. In human history in terms of scale, implications, and profundity. Billions, if not trillions of dollars have allegedly gone into these programs. Presidents have been lied to. Congress has been kept out of the loop. The American people have been lied to. Disinformation campaigns have been conducted to lead us astray, not just the American public, but the world at large. And I will speak in this weird voice. Nobody will stop me from speaking in this weird voice because it is that big a deal. Let's continue. Another highlight. Let me just make sure that everything's working fine. Yep, everything looks fine. Okay, let's continue. And I quote from either from Trump Jr. or Coulthart, not really sure, but let's find out. And I quote, I mean, as recently as November, we were assured in a presentation to Congress, I think this is Coulthart, by one representative of the Pentagon, I think he's referencing Dr. Kozlowski, that there was no evidence of extraterrestrial visitation or engagement with this planet. That is a flat out lie. And you will see the evidence this weekend on News Nation at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will present the definitive evidence from first-hand whistleblowers corroborated by people who've worked with this person. Their military service is impeccable. We also have other evidence that we will present, which is absolutely definitive. And what we are talking about here is a non-human technology. Another highlight. And I'm talking, Don, to scientists inside the program. And these witnesses who are military people who've actually worked at the highest level of the military, including one of them has worked in Delta Force. And they're talking exclusively for the first time about their knowledge of these programs, their firsthand role in the recovery of what they say and know are alien vehicles. So we're talking multiple firsthand witnesses. We're talking corroboration. We're talking tier 1 special operator personnel that are going to, as I understand it, testify in this upcoming special on News Nation Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Should be a firecracker. Let me continue. Here's another highlight, and I quote, I feel like I have to burp. Let me take a sip of water, if you don't mind. I can tell you with their authorization that they took this information to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Pentagon's UFO office. He knew about this, and yet he told Congress something different. That's something that should be investigated. They tell me they presented definitive evidence, including imagery of UAPs to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of Arrow, and he did nothing with it. And Don, this is a real concern. And this is something I would urge your dad to order an investigation into, please. The public have got a right to know this when Dr. John Kozlowski, who's a good guy, I'm told, who's taken over Arrow, when he came into the job last year, he couldn't find, when he was approached by the same team who came to him to tell him the same information, he couldn't find that information inside the Pentagon's UFO office. It had disappeared. And so the very office that's been set up by the Defense Department to investigate this issue and to supposedly give you and me and the general public the truth about what the government really knows about UAPs, it would appear the information somehow got lost. Well, I think that deserves and demands investigation. Okay, let me break that down. So according to Ross, the former head of Arrow, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, was he knew about the crash retrieval program. He was even given imagery of UAPs. He did nothing with it. He didn't tell Congress. And then when Dr. John Kozlowski got into office, the same people came to Dr. John Kozlowski to inform him of all this information. So he went to where he was told to go, and the information was no longer there. And so Ross Coulthart is saying that needs to be investigated. Another highlight, and I quote, and this is Ross Coulthart speaking, Don, I can tell you, I am talking to a whole lot of people behind the scenes who are toying with coming forward. And I know other colleagues of mine are also talking to legacy UAP program witnesses who want to give this evidence. They want to testify. But what they're not getting from Congress or the Pentagon's UFO investigation office is honesty and credibility with their willingness to engage with them and give their evidence. I really think what you need in America is what happened way back in the 70s. Some kind of church commission inquiry that basically digs into this in a public way and brings these people before a public hearing and puts them under oath. And Lord help them if they lie. Because I can tell you, people have taken insurance on this if the Pentagon tries to lie its way out of this. And I'm not saying everybody in the Pentagon knows this. So he's not saying everyone in the Pentagon's lying. Not everyone in the Pentagon's read into it and informed about it. But he's saying that these people should be testifying. And there should be something akin to a church committee. Back in the 70s, when the intelligence agency was engaged in a lot of rogue operations, concealing it from Congress, people should be subpoenaed and come forward. But what's really interesting about what Coulthart said is that, and I quote, people have taken an insurance on this. If the Pentagon tries to lie its way out of this. I don't know exactly what that means, but it seems to me that as this progresses and we get new hearings, new developments like what's happening Saturday, and the Pentagon turns around and the Pentagon says, it is not true. These folks are delusional. They are part of a mental mind virus. Then that might not work because insurance has been implemented that will be able to bite back against that effort. That's my interpretation. Let me make sure this is still working. Everything looks like it's working. Fantastic. Let me go back to a new quote from the interview with Trump Jr. and Ross Coulthart. And I quote, yeah, to be clear, you're also, and this is Trump Jr. speaking. Yeah, to be clear, you're also speaking with firsthand witnesses who are explicitly saying, basically, we are not alone. I mean, this is not hearsay. This is not the telephone game. These are actual people who were there, who saw it with their own eyes, who were involved, multiple people. What are the parameters and extent of this covert alien retrieval program? What agencies, perhaps other than the Pentagon, are involved? And how much of a secret was it until now? I mean, are they not even communicating with other branches of the military? They're clearly not cooperating all that much with Congress. Perhaps they're even perjuring themselves before Congress. Ross Coulthart responds, and I quote, John, I've actually spoken to somebody who's been a director of an organization, an administrator of a very senior organization. It's not a three-letter agency, but it's a very highly respected agency involved in the aerospace area. And he told me he was not briefed into this program, but what we discovered is that the person 3 rungs below him was briefed in. And that's how they've been doing this. What the program's done is it's found people who will be compliant with the cover-up. And that's where the immorality and illegality has come in. Because whilst billions of dollars, and I can say billions, conservatively, of taxpayers' money has been spent on building this project and trying to reverse engineer these technologies, there's been no accountability to Congress and under the beautiful U.S. Constitution, which is a document I envy, which gives Americans so many rights. Article 1, Section 9 enshrines congressional oversight of expenditure on everything in government, and those expenditures have not been disclosed as they ought properly to have been. So what's so interesting is this aerospace guy or girl or other that was involved in, I guess, an aerospace organization, maybe like Lockheed or Northrop Grumman. He's higher up on the chain, food chain, or the ladder, and he was not informed about the crash retrieval program, but someone much lower on the, someone literally 3 rungs below. And the question is why? As Coulthart explains, there is a huge psychological factor that goes into who's told what. And according to Coulthart, if you are perceived to be someone that will go along with the cover-up and you're trusted in that capacity, you are more likely to be read into what's going on. But if you're higher up, right? Higher up on the ladder, but you are not perceived to be someone that will go along with the cover-up, you will not be told about the crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Let me make sure everything's working. Everything looks good. Let me continue. Now, another highlight. Let me just one moment. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, here we are. And I quote, and this is Coulthart speaking. Yeah, Dan, I can tell you there are people who want to come forward and they are good people. A lot of them are scientists and they're frustrated because because good science dictates that scientists share their information and talk about it so that they can get the breakthroughs we need. And one of the things that I think your dad has actually talked about is the ridiculous, unnecessary secrecy of the bureaucracy that has often been used to hide incompetence and corruption. And that's what I fear is going on here. People I'm talking to inside this program, they tell me there is no good reason for the American public not to know about the existence of non-human intelligence. There are good reasons why certain technologies might not be revealed, why things that might be national security sensitive shouldn't be revealed. That's cool. And as a journalist, I respect that. But what's been happening here is inside the program, people have been threatened. And the allegation from these men that I'm talking to is that people have been murdered. There are very grave claims that as part of the cover-up, there have been serious criminal offenses committed to conceal this program. So it's so interesting who Ross has spoken to, according to him. It's not just tier 1 special operators from special forces involved in recovery of these artifacts, allegedly stemming from non-human intelligence, but even scientists are talking to him and are complaining about the secrecy that is corrupt. And the theme of murder, I think, will be covered in the upcoming special on Saturday that will play on News Nation at 8 p.m. Eastern. I think some of these whistleblowers will talk about murder that has been committed to ensure that the cover-up maintains its integrity. Let's continue. And yes, I will continue speaking in this weird voice. And I quote, every time I met them, they've been armed to the teeth. Now, Ross is talking about witnesses to the crash retrieval and back engineering program. Let me continue with this quote. Not because of me, but because of the threat that's posed to them by speaking to me, speaking to Ross. And the fact that inside the program, there's actually been skirmishes. You know, there are things that have happened that have been seriously criminal that need to be brought out into the open. So this is really interesting because I recall when David Grush was part of a documentary that Jesse Michaels put forth on his YouTube channel. I think it's called American Alchemy. And I think he was armed. I do recall that a journalist did a whole article on him. I can't remember the journalist's name. Unfortunately, great journalist. Can't remember the publication. It's like a small magazine that's like in newspaper format. But I remember him saying in that interview that David Grush had a concealed firearm on him. So apparently a lot of these witnesses, because they're scared for their lives, they're packing heat at all times. Can you really blame them? I'd be paranoid as all hell if I was one of these people. Let's continue, and I quote. And this is Ross Coulthart speaking to Trump Jr. on his Rumble show. And I quote, and moreover, I can tell you, they already have the names. This is the crazy thing about this. The witnesses that I am talking to have given evidence to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, and they have given names, dates, locations, and they are prepared to hand over imagery and data. And more importantly, all of that data has been with the Pentagon's UFO investigation office since a long time, early last year. And that's the outrageous thing about this, is while the public has been told there is no evidence of this, it's not true. We don't know everything, and Congress has been flat out lied to. What's been going on behind the scenes is the most monstrous cover-up. Okay, so Ross Coulthart reiterates the AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, has had the data since a long time ago, early last year, about the crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, and they have been explicitly lying to the public about that, according to Ross Coulthart. Another quote by Ross Coulthart, and I quote, "What is going on is there are people in the national security state who have taken it upon themselves to conceal the expenditure of billions, if not trillions of dollars on a program that the public has every right to know about. And in the course of covering that up, serious crimes have allegedly been committed, and all these people want, the only reason these people are coming forward, they gain absolutely nothing from it. What they want to do is do the right thing and provide the American people with the information they think they have a right to hear. It's absolutely unprecedented that people of this gravity, of this background, tier 1 military operators, guys who've worked undercover for very important intelligence agencies in the United States, are coming forward to reveal all they know. And they are doing it because they think you've got a right to know. And also, sir, they think the new president has a mandate to make a change, to do something about it." Can I take a sip of disclosure water? Do you mind? Okay. So Ross reiterates the absolute sheer quality of these witnesses that are coming forward, that, as I understand it, we are going to hear from this Saturday. They're tired of the cover-up. They're tired of AARO blatantly lying to Congress, lying to the American public. Billions, if not trillions of dollars going into the UFO crash retrieval and back engineering program. And it's just like, it's like a government within a government. That's what a journalist said in James Fox's documentary, The Program. Brian Bender, he used to work for, I think it was Politico. He said it's like a government inside a government, because those that are involved in the UFO secrecy and intelligence gathering and investigation and back engineering and crash retrievals, they make all these various decisions and do all these various covert things, including engaging in a disinformation campaign targeted toward the American people. But the Congress doesn't have a say. The American people don't have a say. It is, quite frankly, the equivalent of a government within a government. Let's continue. Okay, another highlight, and I quote, and this is Ross Coulthart speaking to Don Jr. Don, it's the biggest story in human history. Are we alone? It's as simple as that. This is the biggest story ever. And it's funny, at the very beginning of the program, you were talking about the failures of the mainstream media. And I've worked in the mainstream media for 35 plus years. And one of the things I've seen is the gradual diminishing of the respect that people have for the media, because media organizations have allowed themselves to be controlled by government. And one of the terrible lessons in this whole UAP story, when there is a reckoning, when there is a public reckoning, it's going to be the failure of the great broadsheet must-head newspapers, the big TV programs that had the opportunity to investigate this. It was right under their noses, but they didn't want to lose their stories that they're being fed by the PR people for the Defense Department and different intelligence agencies. And they didn't want to not keep their nose clean, so that they were continually fed those stories, and that kind of captive journalism, where journalists are controlled by PR people and by senior people in intelligence agencies, and intelligence agencies in the Defense Department. It has to change because what we're seeing at the moment is a catastrophe of a catastrophe of oversight in the United States. Congressional representatives and senators are kowtowed because of campaign funding and influence, and the media, frankly, they're going broke free to air. Media is basically going broke. Shows like yours, Joe Rogan, Tucker, they're generating millions of viewers. And the thing that's not being talked about is that newspapers, if they're lucky, crack 100,000 readers a day. Okay. So Ross Coulthart stated that the media has failed the public, failed the world, because a lot of these journalists are appeasing the Pentagon, not going into the UFO issue so that they can be at the receiving end of other kinds of stories so that the faucet is not turned off. He seems to be saying that if journalists were to start covering the UFO issue more aggressively, the Pentagon would stop giving them information on other stories that they want to cover. And so they gave in to that pressure. He also said that more free or independent journalism like Joe Rogan and Tucker and his show have not been captive to that dynamic and therefore have been covering the UFO issue much better. What I'll add to this is that, well, first of all, we are approaching the golden years of the media, the great awakening of the media. If all of this is true, because the media on all levels, my friends, if this comes out, are going to be covering this, because what's more interesting than aliens? What's more interesting than an 80-plus year cover-up of UFO UAP? What's more interesting than anti-gravitic technologies in our oceans, coming in and out of our oceans, in and out of our atmosphere, abducting people against their will, cover-ups, men in black, secret programs concealed from Congress, from the public, separate governments that do what they want when they want, stories of murder to keep it secret. I mean, is this not the greatest dream of the media? Imagine how much they'll have to work with this story. New people coming forward, whistleblowers, disclosure, the worldwide conversation. What does it all mean? Where is it all headed? Have we been genetically engineered? Who's pulling the strings? I mean, it's beautiful, isn't it? Let me take a sip of some disclosure water. Please excuse me. Man, let's continue. And I quote, and why it's going to be very interesting to see what your dad does on Monday. Of course, Monday, I guess, is either the first or the second day of his coming into office. I'm hoping when he indicated that he talked about the drones and he said, we're going to be asking some hard questions and revealing what the government knows about drones. I suspect he knows what I'm hearing about those drones, which is that some of them are indeed anomalous and possibly not showing the performance characteristics of normal human drones. The big question is, where are they coming from? Why are they there? And what does the Defense Department know about it? Let me just make sure everything's working properly by going to the comments here. Okay. Yes, everything looks like it's going fine. Let's continue and persist. So it was very recent. I think it was at Trump's house, Mar-a-Lago, is it called? Whatever. A press conference occurred. I think it was well over an hour. But Trump said, look, the current administration knows a lot more about the drones than they're letting on. It's very strange. And he almost seemed to imply that some of this is anomalous. And he also promised that on the second day of his presidency, he's going to report to the American public what's going on. Now, look, that's a big promise. And I'll believe it when I see it, right? I'll believe it when I see it, because in one of his interactions regarding the drones, he was asked if he was briefed on the drones, and he wasn't willing to say, which I found a little bit contradictory, because if he says he's all about transparency, why couldn't he say whether he was briefed on it or not, but maybe there's reasons, good reasons he had. Regardless, to me, that's a small issue. I look forward to the second day. I guess it will be the 21st of January, where he's held accountable because he said he was going to talk to the public about what the drone situation truly represents. And if some of it is truly anomalous propulsion, they don't know where it's coming from, they don't know why it's here. How amazing would that be on the second day of Trump's presidency, and he goes right into it directly like this? Let me try. Dear American people, we've been having a drone issue for months now. Unfortunately, the past administration hasn't been as transparent as I would have preferred, but I'm here to tell you that some of these drones are weird. I mean, really weird. We have technical observations and verification that some of these are using propulsion systems that are outside the scope of our understanding. Now, imagine if the second day of his presidency, he went full blown there. We'd be on a path. We'd be on a path, would we not, to UFO transparency? This is not pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I'm just keeping it real. If he did something of that gravity, we'd be on the path, as it seems to me. I don't know if he'll do something to that gravity. Please bear in mind, I do not go into politics. But as far as Trump or Biden or anybody else in the U.S. government's handling of UFOs is concerned, I reserve the right to comment on that. Doesn't mean I'm endorsing Trump or I'm attacking Trump. Just means I'm covering the situation as it is. Now let's continue. Let's continue. Let me scroll down, and I quote, "Don't the people that are appearing on my show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on News Nation on Saturday night..." Okay, sorry. So this is Ross Coulthart speaking, and I quote, "Don, the people that are appearing on my show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on News Nation on Saturday night are alleging murder. They believe people have been murdered to cover this story up. They believe that as part of the cover-up to stop the American public from finding out about the UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program. Not only has there been mass manipulation through mass media, movies, the media, and general news media, there's also been outright lies and at times threats. People have been told they would be killed, and allegedly people have been killed. And one of the reasons these men are coming forward is because they became concerned that their lives were at risk. They were involved in an investigation into data that went missing from within the program. And in the course of their attempts to retrieve that data, they believe that there may well have been an attempt by their employer to kill them." Woo! I need some disclosure water to process that one. That's a big one. Okay. So just like one of the reasons Grush came out was to protect his life. Grush, in fact, I remember the story that Grush wanted the story about him to come out ASAP because he was very nervous, because the story that came out in the debrief, I think it was in June or July of 2023. It was being shopped around. There were other news outlets that were considering covering it or perhaps wanted to cover it, but they were taking too long. And Grush was really in fear of his life. So they pulled the trigger because Grush was, as I recall, pressuring it to get released. And so we had it on in July or June in the debrief. And so these people, some of them, I suppose, are very, very paranoid. I mean, they're walking around packed at all times. They're so scared of being knocked off. And it's so interesting that there was an investigation, according to Ross Coulthart, into data missing from one of these aerospace companies, I assume. And the employer of the aerospace company was so concerned about that they attempted to kill one of these people. This is not America. What is this? The UFO cover-up mafia? This is crazy talk. We need to put an end to it. We need truth. We need disclosure. We need to put an end to this if this is all true. Let's continue. And I quote from from Don Jr.'s show. And I'm getting a little lightheaded here because I'm talking a lot, but let's continue. And I quote, "If your dad wanted to, he could walk into office on Monday and mandate that this program be revealed." Now, I think there are a lot of people, I can tell you, inside the program who think it's time this was done, who think it's time the public was not lied to anymore and the truth was told, because we really are at a tipping point. If it's true, and I believe it is, that there are technologies that are being studied and explored that would revolutionize power, that would revolutionize propulsion systems, it is a good thing that we're trying and frustratingly, apparently, to reproduce them for the purpose of military advantage, when this could be a benefit for the whole country. The whole world could benefit from these discoveries. These scientific discoveries could be a paradigm change for the human race. And what's happening is apparently there are people who've taken it upon themselves to make the decision that this needs to be kept secret in order to give America a military advantage. But Don, they've had 70 years to do this. They haven't shown any sign of the breakthrough yet. And the scientists that I'm talking to who are telling me they will come forward, they will testify if they're given the chance, they just need that assurance. They need somebody to show the spine that they can be reassured and come forward with the evidence they've got. They will tell you. They will tell the Congress and they will tell the American people that this research is being frustrated by this ridiculous secrecy. And right now, Don, the Chinese and the Russians are secretly working on their own recovered non-human technology. This is an open secret between the foreign adversary powers. Nobody wants to admit it publicly because nobody wants to show their hand to reveal how far advanced they are. But I would argue that there's nothing stopping the president from coming forward and saying, yes, it's true. We are not alone, but there are certain things we're not going to tell you, just like nuclear bombs. We're gonna tell you how to make we're not gonna tell you how to make a nuclear bomb. You've got no right to know that. But the public should have the right to know that the American government is secretly working on retrieved non-human technology. It's an absolute scandal that this has been kept from the American public for 60, 70, 80 years. And good men like David Grush came forward and gave evidence about this to me with News Nation in 2023 when he went public and exposed all he knew. And you know what they did to him? They took away a security clearance, and they did that to try to shut him up. And they ran a disinformation operation about his PTSD and tried to suggest that he was mentally unstable. And you know what's happened to investigate any of his allegations that he loyally and patriotically came forward to give evidence about? Let me guess, sweet FA, almost nothing. And that's the disgrace here, is that your Congress, and I guess this is Trump Jr. talking now, that your Congress has allowed itself to be manipulated. The people who should be doing the oversight, the politicians, they've lost their spawns. They are a bunch of jellybacks. Nope, that's Ross Coulthart. Because only Ross Coulthart would say they are a bunch of jellybacks. That's Ross Coulthart language right there. Nobody else is saying that. So, yeah, I mean, Ross was getting into something that David Grush has gotten into. Many people have spoken about this, how they've been studying this for decades, and none of this technology has entered into the public sphere in terms of like new propulsion systems, new ways of generating power for people, and improving the quality of human life. It has been completely sequestered away into the military intelligence apparatus at the cost of 8 billion people. Are we just going to continue doing this? Are we just going to continue going along with the secrecy, where this is completely a national security issue, but it has nothing to do with human spirituality? It has nothing to do with science and history and philosophy and improving the quality of the human species life on this planet and every other species on this planet. Are we going to continue doing this? When is this going to end? My goodness, my God. I am so happy that whistleblowers are coming forward on Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern on News Nation. God bless every last one of them. Now, I'm not here to tell you that this is all going to pan out, that what they say is true. I don't know. Do I look psychic to you? Do I look psychic to you? I am not psychic, but I'm here for the show. Do you understand? I have been here for the show for a very long time. I have been interested in the UFO topic even prior to 2017. My first video on this channel was about a year before the October 11th, 2017 news conference that was put on by To the Stars Academy. You understand? Do you? Is this coming through? I hope so. Now let's continue. Let's continue. And I quote, let me just make sure this is working. Let me make sure everything's coming through. Okay, good. Everything's coming through. Let's continue. Whew! You know what I'm saying? I'm having an out-of-body experience here. That's what this cover-up has done for me. They're making me have an out-of-body experience right on air. How dare them? You know what I'm saying? I can see I'm around Acapulco right now. I'm hovering around Acapulco. I see beauty. It's nighttime, but I'm also here. I'm bilocating right now, right in front of your eyes. You understand? Okay, let's continue. Let's continue. And I quote, and that's what Jake, and I think this is Ross Coulthart speaking. And that's what Jake and his team reveal in the story that we're doing this weekend at 8 p.m. on Eastern Time on News Nation. We are basically reporting that they are now going to do private crash retrievals. They are going to do what the military is covering up. And there's a new company called Skywatcher, which is going to come forward publicly. And it's going to reveal that it can do retrievals. And it's being funded by private equity and good people from the private industry. People with that same free enterprise initiative that you talked about earlier. They're going to do what the government is failing to do. They're going to tell the public the truth. They're going to come forward and reveal this program, and they're going to leave the military and the defense national security complex behind because they failed. They failed to reverse engineer a lot of this technology. And the reason why is because this stupid bureaucratic secrecy has confounded the revelations that needed to be made public. Okay, this is a huge bombshell that Ross Coulthart is reporting. Whether it's true or not, do I look psychic to you? I have no idea. But what Ross Coulthart is reporting is that there's a new company on the block called Skywatcher that are going to do crash retrievals. The same thing that aerospace companies and I suppose the U.S. military or CIA operations do. Now, I would want to hear more about this because my first question is, how are they going to know when a UAP crashed? How are they going to get there before the military does? And how are they going to, get away with it? But I'm all for it. You know what I'm saying? I want the public, I want the truth to get out. If we need a private corporation to do what the government's doing, what aerospace companies are doing, great. Just get the truth out. I mean, this is wild, guys. It's absolutely wild that Ross Coulthart is saying that a private organization is going to do what like Lockheed or Northrop Grumman, the Directorate of Science and Technology for the CIA. I don't know how it works, man. I read the same stuff you do, you know what I'm saying? But like, that's some cool stuff right there. If it's true, I don't know. Let's continue. And I quote, let me just make sure this is working. Let me make sure. Yep. Looks good. Okay. Let me get to that quote. And I quote, I had a conversation recently with somebody who has a lot of gold braid on their shoulder. And I said to them, sir, is there any good reason why the public can't know that there is a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet? And he laughed at me and he said, Ross, go for it. And he encouraged me to do this story. And I said to him, if there's a good reason why I shouldn't run this story, please tell me. And that's exactly what my friend, the whistleblower, Jake, has done. He's done entirely the proper thing. These guys are patriots. They've gone to the Pentagon. They've told the Pentagon what they knew. I think I'm going to burp any second now. And you know what the Pentagon did? It covered it up. That's what they did. They lied to you. They lied to you, to the American public and the Congress. And worst of all, Don, they lied to the president. And I think that's just unforgivable. The thing that I would recommend is that there should be a reckoning. This has to be done in public. There has to be transparency. The public has to see accountability if you're looking for the deep state, if you're hunting for the bad guys who've done entirely the wrong thing and committed crimes, and overspent the public's money, this is where you need to look. And I'm not saying this is the people I'm talking to in the program who so desperately want to testify. They're the people saying this. They want you and your dad to scream from the rooftops about this and get answers. I'm going to take some disclosure water. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I think in that passage, that quote, that Ross is just reiterating the quality of the witnesses and about how the public beyond the witnesses wants so badly for there to be accountability and a reckoning for for not only the cover up to end, but for accountability to occur. This doesn't necessarily mean people going to jail, although I'm very confident that Ross and most other reasonable people would want those that have committed murder to go to jail. But I think Ross is very in favor of a reconciliation program, but still there can still be accountability, just people admitting to the cover up, maybe apologizing to the cover up. But look, I'm not here to tell you how that should be handled because we all have our opinions. The only thing I can say is we need to end the cover up ASAP because it's very, very dangerous. And if that means having a reconciliation situation, then so be it. And I am for the reconciliation situation, except for crimes like murder and maybe threats and stuff like that. But we'll leave it at that for now. And I quote, I think this is Ross talking. And the only way that I can see it being done is in a measured way with this presidential records review panel. But more importantly, if I was your dad, I would be summoning Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the former director of AARO, putting him in front of a blooming judge and deposing him and demanding that he tell the truth about what he was told by whistleblowers, because I know the Pentagon has been lying, and I don't know why they're lying. I don't know what pretext they're lying on. I don't know what flimsy national security excuses they're using, but this time they've gone way too far, and moreover, protections have been taken. If the aerospace company that hired these men tries to hide at its involvement, they'd better be careful. So So again, this is Ross, I think, alluding to insurances that have been taken. So when this comes out, this is just my interpretation, my subjective interpretation. When this comes out, if people in the Pentagon continue to try to lie about this, there are measures in place to bite back, and I'm saying bite back in a figurative way, not in a violent way, just to be clear, to bite back or to counter the lies. But I love the idea of summoning Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and putting him in the hot seat under oath. Why are we allowing, if these people are, why are we allowing them to get away with this? Why are we allowing them to publicly lie to the American people? There are laws against that. It's not even legal to do, as far as I understand. Since when are disinformation campaigns targeting the American people ever been legal? They're not legal. People should be held accountable. Put Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick in the hot seat. If he's not lying, then he has nothing to worry about. Capiche? Let's continue. Oh, yep, we got more. We got more, baby. We're just going until all my highlights are done, because that's what we're doing. And if you stick with me to the end, you deserve an award. And I quote, a tier 1 operator, think about, okay. So now it's Lou Elizondo talking, because later in the interview with Donald Trump Jr. on his Rumble show, first he had Ross Coulthart on. Subsequently, he had Lou Elizondo on. So now we're getting into quotations from Lou Elizondo. And then as relevant, I'll give you commentary. And I quote, this is Lou Elizondo. A little bit of disclosure water, folks. A tier 1 operator, think about that. We're talking America's, and he's referring to those who I think are going to be testifying Saturday, 8 p.m. on News Nation. And I quote, a tier 1 operator, think about that. We're talking America's finest, the best of the best, tip of the spear. Think of Delta Force. Think of that type of caliber of individuals that when all else fails, they get sent to do a mission, right? They come with a warning, right? Break only, break glass in case of an emergency. So when you have a tier 1 operator and their colleagues coming out and telling the American people, yes, I was part of a UAP program, a crash retrieval program, and here's what we did. And by the way, here's some of the bad things that occurred as well. I think America needs to listen. These are individuals that take polygraphs. They have psychological evaluations on a regular and routine basis. And you know, they are America's finest. So look, folks, if we're getting tier 1 military operators going public, you know what the skeptics are going to say? They're going to say that the mind virus is more expansive than they originally believed, that there are people inside the Pentagon that have misled so much of the U.S. government. People in aerospace companies have been misled. Our top tier military operators who risk their lives on behalf of the American people, who are the most highly trained soldiers in the American military, just like everybody else, just like Grush, just like Commander David Fravor and former Lieutenant Ryan Graves, you know, some of the best fighter pilots that ever served for the U.S. Navy, just like people who have served inside the government with some of the most high-level security clearances. David Grush, I think he worked for the NRO, the NGA. Lou Elizondo spent his career in the intelligence community, highly cleared as well. John Lakatsky. The list just gets bigger, everybody. It just gets bigger and bigger. It's all a mind virus. Everybody is just fooled. It's all a big misunderstanding mind virus that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you know what else? We're going to have more hearings in 2025, and it's just going to be more people with a mind virus. They're just going to tell you that the U.S. government is covering up UFOs and non-human intelligence. And it's just a big mind virus. It just gets bigger and bigger. Heck, even James Clapper. I think he was former DNI. He was head of other organizations in the U.S. government. In fact, I think he was the first director of national intelligence, which is like the most, it's the highest. Like I would say that the director of national intelligence is a bigger deal than the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And he was also the head of other organizations within the national security apparatus. Many people have assumed, and I have no inside information on this, but many people have assumed that he is the coup de grace that Matthew Pines has spoken about. That he said it was going to come out. The person was going to come forward in late 2024. That didn't happen. But if I remember, he said that it still looks like he might come out. I don't remember his exact wording. But here's what I've said, and I base this upon piecing together things that I've seen, things that Matthew Pines has said, things that other people have said, like when David Fravor and it was being interviewed by Ryan Graves, because David Fravor said that a documentary is coming out. I think it's going to be a game changer. I know you're involved in it too. Some incredible evidence is going to come out. He said the who's who of people are going to be in it, and just something flashed in my mind and said, one of the people he's referring to is James Clapper. And if that's the case, then James Clapper has already given his testimony. It will be in that documentary, and other people, if I'm piecing things together correctly, will also be in that documentary. So the mind virus just gets bigger and bigger, everybody. But you know what I love about the mind virus? This is what I love. I feel like I'm the Joker now. I need some lipstick all over my lips. I'm just going wild now, baby. I'm just going cray-cray. I love it. I eat this stuff. I eat it for breakfast. What I love about the mind virus hypothesis is that it's built on a huge Mount Everest-sized mountain of witness testimony from all parts of the globe. People that have claimed to have seen orbs and flying saucers and triangles, and a lot of their testimony is consistent, right? Disparate people from different locations claiming they've seen very similar things. This is particularly true, in the 70s and the 60s, before this was as widespread as it is today. Heck, go check out Finn Hanley's YouTube channel, Finn365. He does an amazing job by recreating videos of people's UFO experiences. And so the commonalities happen over and over again. You know what I'm saying? So not only do we have according to the skeptics, not only do we have a huge mind virus of all these people coming forward. And what's really cool about the mind virus is that it's also F-18 pilots, right? That are susceptible to it, so susceptible to it. Oh, and also tier 1 special operations operators. They're also susceptible to it. I love it. I love it. This is beautiful. I love this with the passion of heaven. And then below this mind virus, you just have 70, 80 years of testimony of people seeing the same things over and over again. But it's just everyone's mistaken. We all should go home. In fact, I want to give out a special thanks to all the debunkers who did not support the UAP Disclosure Act legislation. Thank you so much. You saved Congress so much money. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that was budget dust? Oh, that would have cost next to nothing? Oh, wait a minute. Had the UAP Disclosure Act gotten passed, you would have put UFO celebrities like me in the hot seat, like Jeremy Corbell in the hot seat. You would have put people like Lou Elizondo in the hot seat, Carl Nell in the hot seat, because now you would have that legislation, which would have had a process, which would have either have, given credence to all these claims, or pulled the rug from underneath all of us. But you didn't want the UAP Disclosure Act to get passed? That makes no sense. That makes no sense. Is it because you didn't want your hypothesis tested? Could that be it? I don't know. Maybe you just didn't want your hypothesis tested, right? Because you just wanted to sit behind your computer screen under your little typewriter, right? Your little keyboard, and call people like me a moron. But you can't do that when your hypothesis is tested now, can you? Nah, son, you can't. That's why you didn't want the UAP Disclosure Act passed, because that would have tested your hypothesis, and that scares you down to the core of your soul. You have nightmares about it. You wake up in a hot sweat, don't you? Yes, you do. You wake up in a hot sweat like, oh, I'm so glad the UAP Disclosure Act didn't get passed, because then my hypothesis would have gotten tested. And what if I was wrong? What if I was wrong? Then people like UAP Jesus would have been right. And we can't have that. We cannot have that, because then my worldview would have been corrupted. Is this thing on? Am I even live right now? I can't tell. Let me see if I'm live. Yep, I'm live. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I need the Joker lipstick on right now. Sorry about that. But anyways, let me continue. Sorry. I'm having an episode right now. We call this a disclosure episode where I come from. And I quote, but I am also very optimistic that this story that's coming out is going. Now, this is a Lou Elizondo quote. Listen to this very carefully. And I quote, but I am also very, very optimistic that this story that's coming out is going to change the landscape significantly on this topic. I'm going to repeat that. But before I do repeat that, I'm going to take a sip of disclosure water. And you're going to watch me do that. And you're going to love every second of it. Cheers, y'all. And I quote, this is from Lou Elizondo, but I am also very, very optimistic that this story that's coming out is going to change the landscape significantly on this topic. He's referring to the story coming out this Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, News Nation. So that's interesting. Let's see if his optimism pans out. And let's continue. Gosh, this is like, there's so many quotes, but I think we're almost done, y'all. I think we're almost done. So hang in there. And maybe I should create a shirt that says, I survived UFO Jesus's live stream. Anyways, I'll continue. And I quote, so another recommendation is to have some sort of, I know it's a bad word, but kind of like we have a border czar, and this is Lou Elizondo speaking. We have a border czar and a drug czar. Have a air domain czar that can work with the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. Work with NIM Aviation, the National Intelligence Manager for Aviation. Work with the FAA. Work with the Pentagon. Work with Aero, and be able to give your dad the information that he needs when he needs it. It's really not that tough. a couple executive orders. I think your father had stated that his first day in office, he plans to maybe send out quite a few executive orders. I think it's a great idea. I mean, hallelujah. What a fantastic idea. There's four of draft executive orders right now that are kind of floating around the zeitgeist that talk about whistleblower protections, right? That talk about creating a single belly button, a flow of information, creating a whole of government approach, bringing the scientific and academic communities into this conversation, and then also be able to give your people, like your father and his cabinet, oversight of what actually is going on, who is spending money on what activities as they relate to UAP. Look, this story is going to be a big story. I happen to know already some of the things that are going to be discussed. And I got to tell you, people better buckle up because it's going to be a wild ride. You ask me personally, Don, I'll tell you, I think America can handle the truth. I think America deserves, excuse me, disclosure burp. I think America deserves the truth. That's the reason why I left in 2027 out of protests, even back then, because I think America deserves the truth. So interestingly, Lou Elizondo was recently on News Nation, and this is me talking now, obviously. And he was asked point blank by Chris Cuomo, are you going to be working for the Trump administration? And he wouldn't really give a clear answer. He wouldn't give a clear answer. Almost as if there's a good shot he is going to be part of the Trump administration, or he's already been selected to be part of the Trump administration, but he doesn't want to broach it yet. So maybe Lou Elizondo will become the UFO czar of the Trump administration. And interestingly, a friend of mine, I think he DM'd me this today. Yeah, he DM'd me this on Twitter today, and I quote, and he was referencing Lou Elizondo being on Trump Jr.'s show. And I quote, he said to me, yeah, I mean, if you had told me 5 years ago, an incoming president's son would be sharing news with Lou Elizondo and Ross Coulthart, I wouldn't believe you. I can't see how we make it through the next 4 years without disclosure if there's really is a there. Hey, man, I love it. I've been asked before. I've been asked multiple times, and I always give the same answer. People have asked me, what could happen where your belief in UFOs stemming from non-human intelligence would be falsified? And the answer is, had the UAP Disclosure Act been passed in full with all the parameters, and after a robust multi-year investigation, nothing came up, I would say that the skeptics have a really great argument that there's no there, and it's likely there's no there. So I would say I would be on team debunker and skeptic at least in some ways, if that was the outcome. However, let's look at this through a new angle, because we can kind of tweak that a little bit. I'm not saying this reaches the same threshold, because it doesn't. But piggybacking on my friend, where he said, I can't see how we make it through the next 4 years without disclosure if there really is a there. And I think that's a good argument. I know a lot of people say, oh, Trump's never going to disclose. He has no intent to disclose. He has no desire to disclose. But folks, his whole cabinet, or much of his cabinet, has gone on record saying they're pro UFO transparency. Lou Elizondo might become the UFO czar of the Trump administration. We already know where he comes from. I think there's a very robust chance that we will get UFO transparency under the Trump administration. Now, that doesn't mean Trump will be a good president overall. Doesn't mean he'll be a bad president overall. We're speaking exclusively about UFOs. Based on what I see, I think there's a very good chance that this will escalate to the point where we get UFO transparency. The U.S. government comes clean and says, hey, we've been lying to you. You're not alone. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's get back into The quotes. Oh, another big one. I'll take a sip of disclosure water. From Lou Elizondo, of course. And I quote, let me just make sure this thing's on and working. Okay, it's working. Let's continue. I need to get a second monitor. You know what I'm saying? I need to be like the cool kids. Anyways, I'm feeling a little more sane now, guys. I'm feeling a little more sane. Before I was like UFO Joker, and now I'm feeling a little bit like I got it together. Like I'm the personification of maturity and elegance. Let's continue. Now, this is a quote from Lou Elizondo, and I quote, if you don't want to see him, I think it's not him. It's probably them, referring to UFOs. If you don't want to see them, don't look into the sky. But yes, this conversation is going to continue to happen because more and more incidents are occurring. And if you asked me a year ago, are people just more sensitive to the fact that maybe UAP exists? Or is there an increase in UAP incidents? I was on the fence. I didn't know if we had enough data back then to suggest one way or the other. But I think now, looking back, I think we could say definitively, these things are becoming a lot more bold. In some cases, they're stalking our Navy vessels and Coast Guard vessels that are out doing national security missions on our behalf. They're stalking our aircraft. They're interfering with our nuclear capabilities and equities, and they seem very interested in our sensitive military installations. Now, if that's not a national security issue, Don, I don't know what is at that point. Might as well just throw in the towel, and we all just go ahead and give up and walk away from this great experiment, which I don't think anybody would agree that's the right move. I think the right move is to enable the system to do the job that it was intended to do. We should not have people circumventing the process between Congress and the president. And I think this new president deserves to have all the tools and resources available to him. I mean, how big of a deal is it to create a UAP subcommittee in Congress? It's a pretty easy lift. We have it for things out there that are frankly probably quite ridiculous. And yet for something as important as this, we've already had our intelligence committee come out and say, yes, UAP are real. We may not know exactly what they are, but they're real. How can we neglect that? What are we missing as Americans? Why are we not standing up and writing our elected officials and standing up on the table and banging our fists and saying, no more. We've got to level with the American people. We've got to be honest. Not a minimum. You got to tell Congress and you got to tell the president of the United States. And if not, you're wrong. There's no way around it. So this is interesting. Back to me, of course. Lou used to say that when he was asked if there's an uptick in UFO activity, he used to say, well, we really don't know. It could be that we're just observing it more. We're looking for it more. So he was on the fence. But now he thinks here's what he said, and I'll just quote him. And I quote, I think we could say definitively, these things are becoming a lot more bold. In some cases, they're stalking our Navy vessels and Coast Guard vessels that are out doing national security missions on our behalf. They're stalking our aircraft. They're interfering with our nuclear capabilities and equities. And they seem very interested in our sensitive military installations. Okay. So Lou Elizondo thinks that the UAP, non-human intelligence, presumably, are more bold and more active than they have been. And that seems to be increasing. So maybe we're on a timetable. Maybe the non-human intelligence is like, we've had enough. And maybe they want governments to disclose. Now that's a very controversial idea to people that do CE5 or people that think the government is irrelevant to this discussion. But here's something you have to learn about the universe. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. You may want the universe to be one way, and yet it says nah and is, or it expresses itself another way. I'm not saying this is likely. What I am saying is that maybe the phenomenon actually prefers that governments disclose. maybe it perceives that if the government's disclosed, it'll be less disruptive. And maybe they perceive that it will have the kind of impact on humanity that will do the highest good. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the phenomenon itself is blameless and without sin or fault. Two things can be true at the same time. The phenomenon might want us to protect the world and might care for us in some ways, but also simultaneously could be selfish in some ways. We're dealing with profound complexity. But the point I'm trying to make is that it is plausible, contrary to some people's convictions or desires, that it actually wants disclosure to come from governments. And it's amping up its presence to pressure governments to stop lying to the public. It's just something to consider, just something I'm throwing out there. Let's continue. Okay, okay, oh God. Whew, I think we covered all the quotes. We covered all the quotes. We covered all the quotes that I wanted to cover. And I hope you enjoyed this live feed. I have no idea how many people are watching, but there's nothing else for me to share because, as I told you, I went over both the episode of Reality Check that Ross Coulthart was in today, and then I went over the live show today that Donald Trump Jr. hosted on Rumble with guests Ross Coulthart and Lou Elizondo, and we covered it all. So let's maybe take a bird's eye view right now as we wind down on this live feed. The real question is, what is this special on Saturday going to lead to? Now, I do recall there being a press release by News Nation that someone smuggled or somehow got a hold of footage of a crash retrieval program, of an actual crash retrieval operation, and that will be shared Saturday. So if I'm remembering that correctly, there could be some concrete evidence to go along with the special on Saturday. But I don't know if it's going to reach the threshold of smoking gun any more than the FLIR one, the Go Fast, or the gimbal video did. But it still could be helpful. Number two, everybody has been crying about, I want firsthand witnesses. When are we going to get firsthand witnesses? We need people that have actually licked the UAP, that have put their tongue up to the UAP and licked it, just like this. Just watch, everybody. So we're getting that, folks. Apparently, we're getting that. We are getting people who licked the UAP, who were part of crash retrieval operations. We're getting the very thing that everybody wanted so badly. So that's great, right? That's an escalation, right? That's a development. We should be grateful for that. We should be celebrating that. Now, there are some people who think that nothing is significant. Nothing whatsoever is significant unless it's disclosure. They're like, I don't care. Firsthand witness, I don't care. The president mentioned UAP UFOs, I don't care. For them, the only thing that matters is UFO confirmation. We've entered a new world, the new world. But I would say that there are steps and developments that will lead to the new world. And you might be, and to ignore all of that and categorize everything, no matter what it is, as somehow irrelevant just because it didn't open the door to the new world seems misguided. It seems like you're missing some very important historical events that I think historians, universities, academia will look back at for hundreds of years. We are living, in my opinion, because I could, of course, be wrong. I am famous for saying that I could be wrong. And everyone who watches me enough knows that. But in my opinion, we are going through the shift. We are going through the grand moment in time. Ross Coulthart said that this is the greatest story in the history of humanity, where we learn we're not alone. But here's the crazy thing. We're not just learning we're not alone, folks. We're learning they're here. They're with us. And if they're here, and they're in our oceans, and they're in our skies, and they're in near Earth orbit, and maybe they've made deals with government, what's the next speculation? Are they walking among us? When I go to a Starbucks to get my latte, is the person serving me from the Pleiadian constellation? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. So strap in. Get your affairs in order. Pray to your deity, because this is about to get wild. And you have to prepare your soul. We all have to prepare our souls. And with that, we're going to end this broadcast. I wish you all the very best. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you'd like to support my channel, you can check out my merch shop. You can become a patron, a YouTube member. Give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities can be accessed in the description box below. Or you can just slap a like on this bad boy, and I'll appreciate it so much. Be well.